Thank you so much, Ed. It's so great to be back here in the indomitable spirit of people in this industry, a spirit that has kept the flame despite really not a lot of help from the economy over the past 4 years. And I can't help but thinking as I look out into the audience, just the front row alone, and I see John and Martha King, whose videos encouraged me to be a pilot and got me past my private pilot, my instrument rating. Then I see Russ Meyer and Arnold Palmer, and it reminds me of one day about 12 years ago when I was at the Monterey airport, fresh off of my learning from the King videos, and I was in my 172S at the time, and the only other plane on the runway was a Citation 10, and I never figured out whether it was Russ or Arnold, but I thought, here is the wonderful span of Cessna, my 172 and their Citation 10, so it's great to see that. I'm going to talk about the economy, and a lot of things were alluded to, things that are holding back growth in the economy specifically to this industry. But I want to make a political prediction first, since some of you have heard there's going to be an election next week. And my prediction, I'm 100% certain of this, is that somebody's really going to lose their reputation a week from today. And I'm talking about the polls. If you look at the four most accurate polling mechanisms and predictors of recent elections, the 2008 presidential election, the 2010 congressional election, there would be four of them. And two of them right now are favoring a Romney win, and two of them are favoring an Obama win. Now, favoring a Romney win, one of them is Scott Rasmussen, very accurate pollster. He has Romney up about 6 points nationally as of today, and about 2 points in Ohio. So he's beginning, according to Scott Rasmussen, Governor Romney is beginning to pull ahead decisively in Ohio, if you can call 2%, but if you look at the trajectory. And then you look at another polling mechanism that has been very accurate. It's Politics.com. And what Real Clear Politics does is average the 6 most successful polls over the last 2 election cycles. And Politics.com now shows Romney with about a 2-point lead nationally, and even beginning to pull ahead in Ohio. So this would appear to say that Romney has really got the momentum behind him. There are 2 other pollsters, though, that also have an impeccably good record at predicting the election. Well, one of them is a pollster, and one of them I'll get to in a minute. The pollster who's been very accurate is Nate Silver, who has a blog called 538, and he writes a column for the New York Times. And he was quoted yesterday as saying he thinks President Obama has a 73% probability of winning re-election. This is endorsed by the 4th mechanism, and it's not a poll. It's actually an Irish betting site. An Irish betting site called InTrade. And believe it or not, this is a great example of how futures markets work. When people actually put their money up and bet on the outcome, it turns out to be collectively, the wisdom of the crowd thing kicks in, and it turns out to be fairly accurate. So as of this morning, 62 cents out of every dollar was still going into Obama's re-election prospects. So there you have it. Somebody's going to be wrong. Is it going to be Scott Rasmussen and the Real Clear Politics average of polls, or will it be the Irish betting site InTrade? Regardless of how the election comes out, I'm sure there'll be a lot of drinking in Dublin over that one. Now to the economy. You know, the economy that we're going through kind of reminds me of what we've seen this week. 2 perfect metaphors for the economy. One would be Hurricane Sandy, which the financial meltdown of 2008 and the struggling economy since is kind of our Sandy in the economy. And then Sunday's TFR over Orlando, which was called by one blogger the world's most expensive pizza delivery. Since the president didn't actually get off the plane, I understand. But anyway, there was the TFR, and cast over all of Central Florida. That's kind of representative of the lack of help, other than the senator and the congressman, but certainly from this administration, not a lot of encouragement. And as a result of all of this, the economy, since coming out of recession officially in June 2009, has averaged 2% growth. 2% annual growth. Now, what does that mean? How does that average with other rates of growth? You know that in the United States, since the end of World War II, through the present, we've averaged 3% growth, a little over, actually 3.1. But get this, we've had 11 recessions since that time. We had the Great Recession of 1973 and 1974, where stocks were cut in half and unemployment hit 11%. We had the resignations of the president and the vice president over that period of time, an awful time. And we had this most recent Great Recession. And despite all of those recessions, 11 of them, 2 of them real killers, we've averaged 3% growth or slightly better. So we're growing at 2% now. If we're not in recession, and the numbers say we're not, we should be growing at 4%. We're growing at half of where we should go right now. And here's the point that I would like to bring up. If you remember one thing about my little talk, it's that this industry in particular thrives when the needle is over 3%. This industry is a 3% plus industry. That's when the symbiotic relationship between the economy helping aviation and aviation helping the economy really kicks in. And it's hard to get to critical mass, isn't it, when we're 2% growth? So this election, the domestic issue, the mother of all issues in this on the domestic side, is how do we get back to 3% to 4% growth? Because if we don't, if we struggle along at 2% growth, this industry is going to have severe headwinds. My industry and the media is going to have severe headwinds. A lot of people are going to have headwinds. It is absolutely a moral issue that we get back to 3% and 4% growth when we look at the unemployment in the land. So how do we do that? You know, some of the key issues were alluded to. We have to have a taxation system that is not only benign and reasonable, but predictable. It's all well and good, and I 100% support things like accelerated depreciation and all of those things. But we have to have a scheme where both the individual tax rates and the corporate tax rates are competitive on a global basis. You know, they're not competitive on a global basis. There's a school of thought that says, you know, when you look at the U.S. income tax rate, that it's fairly low on a global basis. Most other nations don't pay state and local income taxes on top of that, and sales taxes and capital gains as well. It's getting pretty stiff. And our corporate tax is now an outlier in the world. You know, Great Britain is down way below where we are. Most countries are way below where we are. We've got to be able to solve this problem. And to the people in Washington who say we need more money because of the deficit, the government is now taking 25% of the GDP, the federal government. A study out of Hoover Institution, where I live, near the Stanford campus in Palo Alto, the economy thrives best. The U.S. economy is really geared for thriving when the federal budget is about 18 or 19% of the overall GDP. It should, under no circumstances, get over 20. And if you think that we are going to have deficit problems the way we are now, if we're going to paralyze the private economy, I think that's going to get worse. Regulation has been alluded to. I want you to think about this as an illustration of the effect of regulation on the U.S. economy. Over the last 20 years, what parts of the U.S. economy have really thrived, come hell or high water, come recession or growth? They've been what I call the algorithmic industries. In Silicon Valley, that would be software. On Wall Street, that would be trading algorithms. You know, if you actually don't make anything, this is a pretty good economy. And why is that? Because the EPA doesn't cross paths with you. You don't make money. You know, the whole idea in Silicon Valley, where I live, is not to make money until you go public. Then you're kind of forced to make money. But the whole idea before you go public is to not make money and put it all into growth. And then what happens? You get to monetize all your work at the capital gains tax rate. So is it any wonder that the algorithmic industries have boomed over the last 20 years, and the actual physical industries, making things, shipping things, transportation, aviation, have been paying a disproportionate penalty in this environment? Third one, and this is really a key one to watch. Carl Schramm, he used to be head of the Kaufman Foundation and is now is an academic, has pointed out that the difference between European-style growth, you know, Europe is kind of used to 2% growth. This year, they would take 2% growth. They would be happy to have 2% growth next year. But by and large, over the last 20 years, they've averaged 2% growth, and the U.S. has averaged over 3%. What is the difference in that 1% incremental difference, that delta between 2 and 3%? Schramm identified it as the number of companies, the number of startups that get to $1 billion a year in revenue within 20 years. They don't have to be Facebooks. They don't have to be Google. They just have to get grounded, and they have to make progress. And where is the biggest market for this industry? It's in those very kinds of companies getting started. We have to have the tax and regulatory policies that are going to get us back to 3% growth, really 4% growth, to make up for the lost time. So I support all the efforts that everybody's making, particularly the senator and the congressman. We've all got to come together, whether we wear a D or an R on our jersey, and really concentrate on the big issue, and that is to get back to 3 and 4% growth. Thank you.